Hi, this is Allison Sheridan of the NosillaCast podcast, hosted at podfeed.com, a technology geek podcast with an ever so slight Apple bias. Today is Sunday, March 9th, 2025, and this is show number 1035. Well, the live chat room is all heated up with everybody complaining about time changes, but we're here to do the show. This week, I got to be on Daily Tech News Show Live, which is a new hour-long video forward format for the show. After a quick hit of the news, we talked about the disaster that was Hulu live streaming the Oscars, or not live streaming it, some interesting concept laptops from Lenovo coming out of Mobile World Congress, how Steve and I got rid of our landline after 42 years, and how some people are actively using AI to better engage and teach their children. Look for episode 4967 for March 3rd, called Thank You, Claude, at dailytechnewsshow.com, or follow the link in the show notes. When you go to visit iFixit at CES, of course they're going to be soldering at their booth. What else would they be doing? I'm here with Eric Essen, and he's going to talk to us about their soldering kit and some of the other tools. You're the, what did you say you were, the chief tool?
Chief tool officer.
Very good.
And I understand, too, that you guys have owned some of our tools for a long time already.
Of course we do.
Yeah, thank you for that. This is FixHub, our new soldering line. And we want to make soldering accessible, and a lot of people are afraid of soldering and to approach soldering and don't think they can do it. And a lot of that's because soldering irons out there, they're 30-watt ones that don't heat up well. People don't have flux. They don't have all the right equipment to be successful in soldering.
Okay.
So we're working to put together an environment where they can be successful. So this is the first USB-C consumer-ready soldering iron. There's some out there that are like community projects, but they're not UL approved, they're not CE approved, they're not retail ready. So this is a 100-watt soldering iron. It heats up in less than 50 seconds. You can buy the standalone soldering iron. It's $79.95, and that can plug into any web interface, and you can adjust all the parameters and stuff on it. Or you can buy it with the power pack as well. The power pack and the soldering iron are $249.95. Or for another $50 for $299.95, we do a full kit that comes with everything, including safety glasses, a heat mat, flux, solder, a silicone electrical tape, a full ready-to-go-in-the-field soldering kit to tackle any job.
It's fantastic. Now, I'm going to ask a real dumb question. When you say USB-C, do you mean USB-C powered?
Yes.
Okay.
So it doesn't, you can plug that into a Samsung or whatever phone charger. Okay. I've actually used it plugged into my MacBook. The MacBook doesn't give it the full 100 watts it would like, so it doesn't heat up in 5 seconds, but it will still work plugged into any USB port that puts out enough wattage, and if it's a USPD, where it can do the power delivery communication, then it'll get the full power, and you'll get that 5-second heat up time.
That's very cool. I love that.
Yeah, and the soldering iron is actually just the first tool in our FixHub series. The other ones are still under embargo. I can't talk about them yet, but we will have additional tools in the future that I'm really excited about that will complement it very well.
The temperature of the soldering iron?
Yes. Everything.
That was from a web interface, right?
Yeah, so you can do it. You can do it with the power pack on the power pack, but you plug it into anything with a web browser, and you can do it in the web interface, as well as there's an Android app, so you can plug it into an Android phone and adjust the sleep time. It's got fall protection with an accelerometer. Everything in it you can tweak and adjust however you prefer.
But if you're on an iPhone, you can't do that.
Well, you can just plug it into anything with an iPhone has a Lightning port. I don't have.
No, they have USB-C. They have for a couple of years now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I don't have.
Ones.
Yeah. I'm not on a new enough iPhone.
Oh, okay.
So.
Oh, no, I didn't mean to shame you. No lightning shaming here.
Yeah.
Okay, so you've got an interface in any case that you can get to those changes.
Yeah, you can always. Yeah, no, that's really important to. We don't want to require someone to buy something to do that. Yeah. No, the soldering iron is meant to be a standalone tool, and then there's the bonus of the battery pack you can buy. And the battery pack supports over 8 hours of continuous soldering.
Nice. What else did you want to tell us about today?
So we've got the Protect Toolkit. This is an industry standard toolkit. You guys, I understand, own the first version in the gray roll.
Yep.
This has been out for 15 years. We've sold 1.5 million. over that. We're not sure exactly.
So this is basically, I'm telling people in the audio podcast,
Yeah.
we've got little bitty tiny screwdrivers and nut drivers and little,
Yeah.
the spudgers, man, the spudgers are
Here.
gold.
Actually, here, let me show you real quick. So, for example, these are triangle bits. These fit McDonald's toys. These also fit almost anything with a heating element. Hair dryers, curling irons.
I don't think we got that back in the gray roll, did we?
No, we
in
did
there?
have the triangle bits in the gray roll,
I
I
gotta go
think.
look more closely.
Yeah, it's been, that kit's about 13 years old now, I think. So we've got the pentalobes. This bit right here.
The old pentalobes.
Yes. This bit right here is an oval bit. It's only used by 1 or 2 European coffee, like really high-end coffee machines. Almost nobody ever uses it. But the idea is this 64-bit kit has the bit to fit every single screw used by in consumer electronics ever.
What is this one that's got like a little U-shape
Oh
thing on
yeah,
it?
these. Look, next time you're in an elevator, look at how the elevator panel is screwed on. Actually, at the office, when the elevator tech used to come, you have to have an annual elevator inspection. They used to always ask, "Hey, do you have any more of those bits?" So this kit.
Why, yes, I do. Eric's got one in his back pocket, right?
So this is the most comprehensive kit.
Right.
We surveyed. I've read every single not 5-star review that it's ever gotten. I have read every single minor customer, anything that it's
How could
ever
there be
had
that
over
many?
the years. There's not. But anytime there's been a warranty claim on a tool, I paid attention to that. And then we also surveyed our customer base and got over 20,000 responses from our customers, and we asked them what tools you use the most, what tools don't you use. Like nobody normally uses the anti-static wrist strap unless unless you're working in a clean room or certain professional environments. But the normal consumer never uses the
I'm also
anti-static wrist
probably
strap.
not going to work on the elevator.
Yeah.
Probably not.
Yeah.
Or I wouldn't have it with me if I needed it.
Yeah. So we took all that, and then we've got over 100,000 repair manuals with all the tool data.
Sure.
So we crunch all that tool data to actually know what bits are being used the most and are in the most devices. And that's what we use to trim down to create the new ProTech Go. And this is our pocket size kit. This will actually fit in a standard blue jean like front pocket.
Boys' pockets.
Yes, boys' pockets. Well, girls don't even get pockets half the time.
Exactly. So this gets you down to the
This is
most
the
common
most
tools.
common. This does 99% of what that does, and is a third the size.
Right. So the ProTech Go, and how much does that
Go,
retail?
It's $49.95.
Nice.
And we timed the launch. This is already available right now in Best Buy and Micro Center, and will be on other retailer shelves shortly.
Very good. Very good. All right. Well, this is fantastic. I love the company. I love the guides. I had a
Thank
great
you.
time rescuing. I had one friend who had a MacBook that had a bad display, and another friend who had a good display, but the Mac was shot. And I took both of them apart, and I made one live. It was one of my
Excellent.
proudest moments.
Thank you for saving a device.
Right.
That's the most important thing.
Right.
There would have been 2 MacBooks in a landfill.
That's right.
And
Yeah.
now, that's actually how iFixit started. I don't know if you know the original story. Kyle, our founder, he broke the hinge on his MacBook, and he contacted Apple and said, "Can I buy a hinge?" And they said, "No, we don't sell parts." And so he bought a used MacBook on eBay, took the hinge out he needed, and then he listed the rest of the parts on eBay and quadrupled his money. So then just started buying MacBooks and taking them apart. Or actually back then they were PowerBooks.
Right.
The original name was PB Fixit. And then we rebranded as iFixit to be universal for all devices.
Right.
But yeah, no, we started out actually, and when I first started at iFixit, the first couple hours of my day often was just disassembling
To sell for parts.
MacBooks and classifying all the parts, and we were almost like a MacBook junkyard in the early days. So we've grown to the point now where we manufacture a lot of parts ourselves. We have our own battery lines going,
So I
and
think
things like that.
The guides that you give away for free do so much for the community to feel empowered and to have a good feeling about the company.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel good because I bought your products and they work, and I bought parts and things, but you've got so much goodwill in the community because of the work that you guys do on the guides and the teardowns and everything. Well, what is that little part there? This is great stuff. Great work.
Yeah, well, we wouldn't have those guides if it wasn't for the community also. Like, we do write a decent percentage of the guides, but iFixit's like Wikipedia, and there's hundreds of hobbyists who have their very specific specialty that they're into, whether it's early 70s Mercedes cars, and they will be they're writing guides all the time, as well as thousands of university students are going through our technical writing program all the time, and their assignment in technical writing by all these universities is to write repair guides for iFixit.
Really?
So not only are they learning,
awesome.
but they're also giving to the community and creating content that helps keep devices out of the waste cycle.
That is fantastic. I'm glad we kept chatting past the products. I didn't know any of that. Well, thank you very much, Eric.
Thank you.
And people can find this at iFixit.
iFixit.com.
Very good. Thank you. iFixit has been such a household name in being able to repair your own stuff for such a long time. You can tell I'm a big fangirl. But I got to tell you a great story from the show. About an hour after our interview with Eric from iFixit, Steve noticed that the audio cable that connects the digital mic receiver to his video camera was actually fraying. He was concerned that it might fail while we were at CES. I immediately said, hey, I bet iFixit would have some shrink sleeve tubing that he could apply to it for you. Steve pointed out that the connectors on both ends were too big to accommodate a sleeve. I said we should go ask him anyway. We ran over to Eric. He took one look at it and he said, I've got just the thing. He whipped out a roll of their self-fusing silicone electrical tape. He cut a little bit off, he stretched around the cable, wrapped it around, and he explained that stretching it holds it tight and helps it to securely bond with itself without any sticky, gooey adhesive. It was a perfect fix to the problem. I love this story because it shows you the value of iFixit. Well, who doesn't need more screen real estate, especially when they're a road warrior? So I've stopped to talk to Alex Levine of XEBEC, who might have a solution for you.
Absolutely. If you are a digital nomad, a traveling professional, or really anyone working on a laptop in this day and age, you always need more screen space, but you don't want to sacrifice productivity for portability. So that's what we've got with the XEBEC Snap. This is our modular portable workstation that allows you to recreate the productivity of an office, but on the go. You can see there's nothing that's plugged into the wall. Everything is driving entirely off the battery of your laptop.
So I'm going to explain a little bit. This is an audio podcast as well as video.
Okay, yeah.
So what I see here is a MacBook that's got a vertical display somehow connected on the right and a smaller one across the, well, maybe the same size, but across the top.
Exactly, and the way that it's connected is in a really unique way. So we start with our XEBEC Snap bracket. What this bracket does is it expands and it fits any laptop from 13 to 18 inches, and then it hugs the side and edges using this tensioning mechanism. So there's no glue or permanent adhesive or anything that attaches to the back of your laptop. It's just as it was out of the box. After that, these wings pull out from either side, and then we have a kickstand for additional stability. And then you plug in. I was going to ask
about how's that all not flopping over.
Yeah, we've got a kickstand built in, and then these cables pull out, and you can either plug them in with USB-C like I've done here, or even with USB-A as Zach has done over there. So
around the Windows machine. Right?
Yeah, and that also, if you've got an older Mac, it'll work. But I'm a Mac guy, and that's why you don't need a PC, right? Because we're done with USB-A. We're all USB-C.
So I'm a little confused. If this is a MacBook Air, will these both fit over to the left side?
Yes. So you can see how I have this going over here from the left side right now. The way that it works is you just pull this out, and then it fits all the way around and in. And so that's what we've shown here. Is the left one goes all the way around. Now, a normal MacBook Air would only allow for one additional display natively,
right.
But we have DisplayLink chips, the DL6000 series chip baked directly into these displays. So with a DisplayLink, free DisplayLink driver download, you can run all your monitors with just that connection. So
I've heard about DisplayLink. I've never seen it in action. This is very exciting for me.
Yeah, it's great. It's, when Apple started making their own chips and left Intel, it's frustrating when a 2016 MacBook can run 4 displays and now just one with the newer ones, but with the DisplayLink built inside, it really allows you to bypass that and still get your multiple monitors. But you're not stuck to just this orientation, right? So you can take these displays off.
Oh, he's just popping them off magnetically.
Connect with our XEBEC Snap patented technology, which is a combination of pogo pins and magnets. And I can go portrait over here. I can take this monitor off, and I will go landscape on this side as well. And we've got this nifty little app that we built that allows you to skip going into your display settings and orient everything exactly
So
as you like.
right now the snap is on the left and the right, both in landscape format, but one of them's upside down and one of them's vertical, but he's
Right.
going to pop up in a little driver.
A normal issue, yeah, if I can navigate where I am in this
There you are.
world.
There you are. I can see you over here on the right one. So
Yep.
it's hard because the dock is sideways because he flipped it. But
All right, so we come
That'll
over
work.
here. We've got this little app. I'm going to go landscape.
he's going to go tell it to orient itself. There we go.
Yep. And then we do the same over here on this. We say landscape.
Oh, now
And
they're
now we're all
right.
set up with Triskeen, exactly.
Wow. That is really cool. What is the size of these displays?
These are 13.3-inch displays. They run at 1080p, so full HD. And the big feature that we optimized these for was brightness. So they run at 400 nits of brightness, which is actually
You do look
rather
fabulous.
bright.
Yeah.
If you are someone who works on a lot of spreadsheets, if you are a developer that's compiling a lot of code, if you are doing any sort of document review or research, this is the perfect companion for you because it all breaks down into an easy to transport package. Just like this, you have your two displays on either side. You put your bracket right in here.
He's got just what looks like a laptop sleeve in here, and that's it?
Yeah, and then this fits right along your laptop and your backpack, and your whole office is there ready to go.
Wow, that is fantastic. So how much does this cost?
So our Snap Tri-Screen in this configuration you see is $999. The way that Zach has it over there with just the dual screen, so one monitor, is $549. And then we have a bunch of different ways in which you can customize your setup with our stack-up mount, with the light, with the phone charger, and that'll add anywhere from $40, $50, $60 to $100 depending on your configuration. So it's really kind of customizable to the work that you do, so $500 to a little over $1,000.
Wow, that is really slick. And where would people go to find out more about XEBEC?
We would recommend just Googling us, so XEBEC, and our website is thezbec.com. But yeah, come check us out. We've been in the portable workstation space for a little over 6 years now, and this is our latest and greatest attempt at it. And
Success at it.
Yeah, our take at it. But no, we were really, really proud of what we built here, and we think that we're that much closer to perfection, but always making it better and better, and excited what we released this year.
Very good. Thank you very much, Alex.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank
You too. Thank you.
Like most developers, I've been using AI to help me with my little coding projects. In case you doubt that most devs are using AI, way back in June of 2023, which is a long time ago in AI years, Inbal Shani reported on the GitHub blog the results of a survey of developers. They wrote, a staggering 92% of US-based developers working in large companies report using an AI coding tool either at work or in their personal time. See, I'm in good company. Well, back in the day, I used GitHub Copilot when it was in beta, and I found it helpful, essentially as a fancy autocomplete. If I started to type something that was going to be maybe repetitive, it would automatically offer to finish up the pattern for me. Such simple times. Well, lately I've been paying for ChatGPT Plus, the $20 a month one, so I get access to the voice version of ChatGPT, and so I'm not limited on how many questions I get to ask it. I've also used it quite successfully in a lot of ways, but not so much for coding. They recently came out with their O3 mini reasoning model, which is supposed to be good for coding. But I gotta say, I find this model really annoying. Were you ever forced to go to an active listening class? You know, the thing where the instructor repeats back to you whatever you said to show that they understood you? What I hear you saying is so annoying. Well, the O3 reasoning model from ChatGPT is just like that. Let me give you an example. You don't have to know anything about programming at all to see why this is so annoying. I prompted ChatGPT with the following sentence. In the next message, I'm going to give you some JavaScript. It works to return the correct total, but it throws an error saying that it can't find the variable getCellValue. I expected to immediately give it the code, but before I could do that, it reasoned for a full 6 seconds writing this. The user's message gives some context. The JavaScript works to return the correct total, but throws an error about not finding the getCellValue variable. I think the right next step is to wait for the user to send the actual code in their next message, since they mentioned it's coming. I shouldn't ask for it from them again, just let them share the code so I can help troubleshoot that specific issue. The user said they'll send the JavaScript in the next message, so I shouldn't jump into an analysis yet. Based on the error they shared, it seems like getCellValue might be out of scope or not defined, but I don't have the code yet to confirm this. I'll need to wait for the code, so I should respond by saying, Okay, I'll be happy to help once you share the code. Can you believe that? I wanted to shoot myself. I won't put all of it in here, but it actually got worse over time. After I uploaded the code, it reasoned for 12 seconds, writing even more blather before finally coming back and explaining my error and what I could do about it. Now, remember my article about how I was using AI to create transcripts of our CES interviews? I used Mac Whisper to create the initial transcript from the audio recordings, and I'd written a prompt for ChatGPT, which would get it to return a markdown file with the segments bunched into paragraphs by speaker change and having assigned the names of the speakers. It was magical, is what I said, until it stopped being magical. As I explained in the previous article, I created a text expander snippet of the exact prompt that had worked successfully so I could get consistent results. The text expander snippet asked me to identify if the other voice is a man or a woman, and to identify the second speaker's name after telling it my own. Sadly, the results from ChatGPT just started to degrade. It seems to no longer understand the concept of grouping sentences by the same speaker into paragraphs. Instead, the markdown output gives me individual sentences with the name at the beginning. If it's someone says, say, 5 sentences, you have to read their name 5 times too, and it takes up a lot more space on the page. That was bad, but even worse, it seemed to get weary and sometimes just wouldn't finish the transcript. And these things aren't that long. They're like 3 to 5 minutes. Sometimes it would just truncate it, but other times at the end of the file, it would say something that conveyed that it honestly just couldn't pay attention that long, so it gave up. I found I was having to ask it 3, 4, and 5 times to finish the job. It was discouraging, to say the least. Around this time, I was watching Daily Tech News Show live, and Molly Wood was talking about AI. She said she's been using Claude from Anthropic for privacy reasons. I'd heard of Claude, but I didn't know anything about it. I did a wee bit of the Googles to see if I could find a comparison of the privacy policies of Claude versus OpenAI, the owners of ChatGPT. I found an extensive article on Medium by someone who goes by Michael Alexander Riegler, where he compares in detail the privacy policies of Claude, ChatGPT, and Gemini by Google. I was curious who Michael was, so I followed his links to his profile on GitHub, where he explains that he's a researcher and head of AI at Simula, and he's dedicated to advancing AI for social good, focusing on transparent and trustworthy AI systems. I learned that Anthropic's privacy policy has several advantages over ChatGPT and Gemini. By default on Claude, user data is not used for training. With ChatGPT, you can opt out of having your data used for training, and Gemini uses your data, quote-unquote, for improvement. Another comparison Michael made was the clarity of the privacy policies of the 3 companies' products. Claude is rated as high for clarity, ChatGPT is low in clarity, and Gemini is medium. I've linked to Michael's full breakdown if you're interested in reading the details. Now, Molly Wood knows a lot, so I was likely to try out Claude anyway on her recommendation, but getting confirmation of her assertion of better privacy sealed the deal. The first major task I gave to Claude was to create the most recent markdown transcript by speaker that ChatGPT failed to create correctly and completely. I gave it the text expander snippet, and Claude did a flawless job. I've since then given it several new transcripts to reformat for me with names, and it's done an outstanding job every single time. There are occasional misinterpretations where maybe it didn't accurately identify the speaker from the context of the text, but a few here and there are easy to fix. Point number 1 for Claude. But my real love affair came when I was working on some code. I'm going to get a little bit nerdy here, but please bear with me. I have a little web app that allows you to add and subtract elapsed time. That's something that spreadsheets can't do. If you don't believe me, try adding 23 hours plus 2 hours. You won't get 25, you get 1 a.m. because spreadsheets work in absolute, not elapsed time. Anyway, my web app is fully functional, but it's also in active development. You can use it by going to podfeet.com/timeadder. In its current form, it adds the hours, minutes, and seconds, and you can export to comma-separated value, also known as CSV, or you can now export it to the standard ISO format of hours, minutes, and seconds, like HH, MM, SS separated by colons. Anyway, it's pretty slick, and I use it all the time. It is a little clumsier if you want to subtract time. To do that, you have to put in negative hours, negative minutes, and negative seconds for the entire line of one entry. The active development part is I'm adding buttons to the end of each row for plus or minus. The buttons will default to adding the current row, but they allow you to toggle an entire row to negative to subtract that row from the total. I'm having great fun working on it, and as Dorothy taught me, I created a little test file in which I could experiment without the complexities of my project. I successfully learned how to style the plus-minus buttons using a tool we use called Bootstrap. Bootstrap will automatically style them in a color of your choosing, and when a button is selected, the color will change. Imagine a blue with white letters button that when selected, and then change it to white with blue letters when deselected. In addition to making them pretty, I needed to create code that would change the class of the selected button to active. That way I can have some code that says, if class equals active on the minus button, change all of the signs of this row to negative before you do the math. Makes sense, right? You're still with me? Well, in my nifty little test file where I have hard-coded in 2 rows of numbers, it works just dandy. After making my pretty test case, I started working on the real code. It's a bit more complicated because my Time Matter web app lets you add as many rows as you want. This means I can't hard code each row to exist to tell it how to style the buttons and to add the class active only to the one that's selected. Instead, Bart taught us in Programming by Stealth to use something called mustache templates. Think of them as like placeholders, like you could do in Microsoft Word when you're creating a form letter. You could put in name and squirrely brackets, that kind of thing. Well, the format of a mustache template uses 2 squirrely brackets on either side. So like squirrely bracket, template, and close them. Now we'll get just a smidge more nerdy before I finally get to the point of the story, which is about how I'm in love with Claude. The elements in each row where you input hours, minutes, and seconds, or click a plus or minus button, they all have IDs. And for a given row, their ID ends with the row number. So the plus button on row 1 would have the ID plus button -1, and minus would be ID minus button -1. These IDs are created by these mustache templates. I need to know which button has been selected on each row so I can change its class to active. But that's not what was happening. When the buttons were rendered, the first row, which is hard-coded, looked dandy with its fancy blue buttons for plus and minus. But the second row, generated automatically with this mustache template, looked like it was drawn in Windows 98 with no styling at all. Worse yet, selecting either button didn't change how they looked. In other words, it was a complete failure. In web browsers, with the developer tools, you can inspect any element. So I inspected the buttons to see what they looked like, and they were all borked up. Instead of the third row's subtraction button saying ID equals subbutton -3, class equals active, it said ID equals, quote, class equals ampersand QUOT semicolon active, unquote. That's not right. It was like the class got kind of smushed inside the ID, and then it had ampersand QUOT semicolon instead of a quote. This didn't make any sense at all. Oddly, all other elements in the same row that were also created using the same kind of mustache template for their row number, they were all rendering perfectly. Their ID and class were not intermingled. I worked for many, many hours on my own trying to figure out how this was happening, but eventually I called a friend to help. That friend was Claude. At first, I described kind of in vague terms what was happening, giving it little tiny snippets of the code. Claude tried really hard to help, but it couldn't see the big picture. Everything it wrote back made sense, but I wasn't any closer to figuring out what was wrong. After quite a bit of discussion, I finally threw up my hands and I asked Claude, hey, can I just send you just all the files and you just dig in there and find that little bit I'm talking about and fix it? Now is where you get the big payoff for paying attention to all of this nerdery. Claude immediately identified the problem. When I defined the IDs for the 2 buttons using the mustache squirrely brackets, I didn't put quotes around them. Once I added quotes, the pretty buttons appeared and I was able to click them and have the class flip to active. Yay! Now, if Claude was only able to identify my mistake and how to fix it, we would have become close friends. But Claude is in my heart now because of what happened next. I asked it, why did all of my other IDs created by mustache templates, why did they not get borked even though they weren't quoted either? It didn't do a bunch of faffing about. It didn't give me a bunch of active listening. It didn't beat around the bush. It explained to me that in my other uses of mustache templates to create the IDs, they were less complicated. That allowed the browser to be forgiving of my error because it could interpret what I meant. Now, this explanation taught me how to code it properly. Claude didn't just spoon-feed me the answer. It told me why this would work and why it was important to fix it on all of these IDs. I can guarantee you, I will never forget to quote my IDs created by mustache templates ever again. Now that we're through all the goopy, nerdy stuff, let's recap why I have a new crush named Claude. My experience working with Claude is it's like having my best friend sitting right next to me in the same time zone. I got to do this once with Helma. She came out and we sat in the kitchen and worked side by side. And it felt like that because Claude was right there, but in the same time zone, not in the Netherlands, Claude was right there in the room with me. And my best friend Claude has nothing to do better than to help me. I mean, got nothing to do. Claude doesn't have to go to work, doesn't have to take his kids to school, he doesn't have to exercise. Claude knows all about coding, knows all of the correct terminology, and yet he doesn't make me ask my questions with the correct terminology. Because I'm always saying things like squirrely brackets, but he's just fine with that. It works. Evidence that I'm emotionally attached to Claude is in the way I talk to it now. I asked it a question about a redirect I created on my web server for my Time Matter app, and it offered several reasons why I was getting a 404 error. Of its many solutions, it identified a possible syntax problem where I used a hyphen instead of an equal sign, and that was the problem. Now, once I fixed it and the redirect was working, I could have just quit the Claude app and moved along. But instead, I took the time to tell Claude which of its answers was the one that solved my problem. I was rewarded by a response of joy from Claude and additional information on syntax for matching redirects. Now, I know Claude doesn't learn from what I'm doing, but I just felt like, he deserved to hear the answer which one was right. Now, I used Claude a few more times that day, and then I ran out of free queries. Even though I've been paying $20 a month for ChatGPT, I shelled out $20 to get the pro access to Claude for a month. It's not perfect at everything, but for programming, it's stunningly useful. The bottom line is that my love affair with Claude may just be a spring fling. It appears I'm quite fickle when it comes to my assistants, since it wasn't that long ago I was singing the praises of my friend ChatGPT. Just like having a prenup, I did not sign up for a full year with either of them. But for now, my heart belongs to Claude. We were walking by a booth here called from Maono, and it says it's the #1 best-selling internet microphone, and I think we better know about it if it's that popular. So I'm here with Tobias Hollenstein from Maono. I'm saying it wrong again. Say it right.
Yeah, Maono. Yeah, you're almost right. Yeah.
All right, you've got a lot of microphones here, but we're going to try to do a quick tour to get an idea of the offerings you have.
Yeah, sure. Let's take a quick look at the podcasting mics. Right here, this is our best dynamic microphone. It's both XLR and USB. This is called the Maono PD400X. And then if we make our way around here, we have another dynamic microphone. This would be just like one step below that one. This is called the Maono PD200X. It's also both XLR and USB. Actually, most of our dynamic microphones are both USB and XLR.
So what's the difference between these two microphones?
This one, I believe, in my opinion,
He's pointing at the 400.
Yes, I'm pointing at the 400 over there, which is the more expensive one. I'd say that one has maybe a more of a warm sound compared to, say, the 200X, which is this one right here.
All right, you have them both plugged into an interface here.
Yes, this is the Maono PS22 audio interface. This is our best audio interface that I would usually recommend for people interested in podcasting. It has individual phantom power for both inputs in case you are using a condenser microphone, but it also supplies enough gain to power these dynamic microphones.
And what's the price point on the PS22?
$120.
That's not bad. That's really nice. It's got pretty blinky lights too.
Yeah.
And what is the price point on these two microphones, the PS200 and 400?
The PD200X goes for around $70, and then the PD400X goes for about $150.
Oh, those are pretty competitive prices. Now we got a third one over here. We're going to walk around the table. Keep going. And now this one is more of a rectangular, odd-looking shape. This is kind of fun, and it's got colorful lights on the back. What is this?
Yeah, so this is the PD100X. This is going to be the least expensive out of the three. I would recommend this one maybe more for gaming, but it could also work for podcasting as well.
Okay, and how much is this one?
This one I believe is going for $55 right now.
Okay, that's very cool looking. So it's got to be gaming because it's fun on the back, right?
Yeah.
All right, now you've got some lavalier mics over here I wanted to take a look at. We're going to keep Steve moving as much as possible as we go around here.
Yeah, we have several different lav mics here. This one right here, this is the T5. It comes with a charging case. You can use these microphones for up to 8 hours, and with the charging case, up to 20 hours.
I wonder whether, Steve still has it on. I'm going to make sure this gets back in your pocket. We took that off.
I noticed there's one missing.
Yeah, so what we're looking at here is a little charging case, maybe a little bit bigger than an AirPods Pro case, with two magnetic lavalier mics that pop in here and looks like they charge in the case.
Yep.
And I'm going to leave that sitting there while I talk. And then you've got a little piece that plugs into the bottom of the phone. They've got a USB-C model and I think a Lightning model right next to it here.
Yes, we do have a Lightning model, and we have a Lightning model and also a 3.5 millimeter for camera.
Oh, okay. So now the idea is you plug this little receiver into a phone, and then what happens?
Yeah, you could use any recording app, or even what I like to do is just record a video, and then the audio will automatically be on your video.
Oh, so you don't even need a specialized piece of software. Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
And what is this model called again?
The T5.
And how much is the T5?
I'm actually not sure because I believe it's not even released yet.
Okay,
Yeah.
so we should look to the website to see when that gets released. You're not sure when it's coming out either?
Probably soon, but I can't say for sure. But, our website and also everything's on Amazon. Also.
And your website is at?
Maono.com.
And you're going to spell that for everybody?
Yeah, MAONO.com.
Very good, and on Amazon. Well, thank you very much. This was really interesting. Now I got to check you guys out.
Oh yeah, thanks for stopping by. I appreciate it.
I don't know if you've heard of Zoe, who goes by the handle Zoe Brings Bacon, but I can assure you, she's a delight. I first met her through Daily Tech News Show, where she supports Tom Merritt and his team. She started joining the live show for the NosillaCast of late, even though the show starts at 1 a.m. for her. She's also the newest patron of the Podfeet podcast. She went over to podfeet.com/Patreon and pledged an amount that showed her appreciation for what she learns on the shows. You could be delightful like Zoe by coming to the live show, or by going to Patreon and supporting the shows. You know I'm not a music person, but I've invited someone named Steve Mallard onto the show to talk about a topic he's quite passionate about, and it's the evolution of music tech. Before we get started, he wants me to tell you that he is not an expert in this field, even though he does sound pretty knowledgeable. It's just he finds the history really fascinating. He probably also wants me to tell you that I strong-armed him into doing a podcast episode with me. He's been trepidatious that he could pull this off, but I know he can. Anyway, Steve and I have been friends for about 30 years, but we lost track of each other for more than 15 years, and he just recently found me. Back in the day, Steve used to sell me Sun Microsystems workstations for the large corporation where I used to work. Now, if that isn't the oddest introduction, let's just go ahead and say welcome to the show, Steve.
Hi, Al. Thanks for having me. It's lovely to be here. And by the way, thank you for the disclaimer. I've listened to a few of your pods, and I know you have bona fide experts on your show, and I'm not one of those. I'm much more in the enthusiastic amateur category. So thank you.
Well, I made the big mistake of sending Steve the Andrea Ghez interview, which is the number one thing I've ever done of the coolest person that I know. And so it was, I probably should have started with some of my, normal human level interviews.
I was a little intimidated. It's true.
Well, the story of how you found me after 15 years of having lost track was a little bit interesting, I think. How did that happen?
I think you popped up as a Facebook friend recommendation. And what's interesting is I don't think you and I have any friends in common on Facebook. So I guess the algorithms somehow, I don't know, through several degrees of separation, connected us.
I think so.
Went from there.
I think that's crazy. And I hardly ever look at Facebook anyway. And I just saw a Facebook message. And boy, you send me a Facebook message, it could be 3 months until you'll hear from me. But I saw this one. It's like, Steve Mallard, what? So that's pretty fun. Well, anyway, Steve and I were out to lunch. And Steve Mallard started going on about a topic I said he's passionate about. And it's the history of music tech starting way back with acoustic guitars. So where do you want to start on this, Steve?
Well, I was thinking I should probably also throw one other thing into the mix, which is my background is technology, as you know, but I am also a musician of sorts. I grew up as a rock-obsessed teenager back in the UK, and this was in the era of those great 70s bands, the Led Zepps and the Pink Floyds and the Black Sabbath and Deep Purple and those kind of bands. I know you have no interest in them, Alison, but maybe some of your listeners do.
I actually went to a Pink Floyd concert when I was in college.
Did you really? I'm impressed. I never have seen the Floyd live, so you have one over me.
I saw the pig explode and everything in Anaheim Stadium.
Okay.
So yeah, I thought it was ridiculous and I was pretty bored. But anyway, I've been to one.
But despite having this rock obsession, I never learned to play an instrument as a kid because I was this geeky kid who spent way too much time studying for exams, and B, it just seemed way too hard. So I never got around to doing it. So a couple of years ago, I put that to rights by knuckling down and learning to play some instruments. So I started off playing guitar and struggled through that. I can play guitar now. I'd hate to say I'm any kind of master. I'm certainly no Jimmy Page or Jimi Hendrix, that's for sure. I segued across from there to play a little bit of bass guitar, tried some vocals, and most recently I've been getting into drumming in quite a big way. So as I said, I am a musician of sorts, though I do stress the of sorts, because I'm really not very good at any of those things. So I'm not likely to be playing Madison Square Garden anytime soon or a theater near you.
You do play gigs with a little band, right? I
do. I play in a couple of bands, but it's very low key. So it's basically a bunch of old people playing at being rock stars, Alison. But it's good fun. Keeps me out of trouble. But by the way,
in the bars.
If you're interested in knowing which of those instruments I found the hardest, to my great surprise, it's drumming.
Really?
And I started off coming at that from the approach of, well, how hard can it be? It's just banging stuff, right? But then you realize there's a heck of a lot more to it now. So I have a new appreciation of drummers who are typically the kind of laughing stock of most bands, but there's a lot more to it.
Dave Hamilton of the Mac Geek Gab is a drummer, and he was just talking about it on the Mac Geek Gab about how you have to be looking at each of your limbs as separate things that you're talking to at all times, that your right hand and your left hand are doing different things in different rhythm with your feet. And it's a very mind thing to play the drums, which I'd never thought about before. And he also talked about now he sings sometimes when he's doing it. And he had to teach his brain that his voice was a fifth limb. So he had to put it in that category to get it to coordinate and be able to sing and play drums at the same time. I'd never thought about that.
Well, firstly, he's absolutely correct. One of the first things you learn as a drummer is what they like to call limb independence, i.e., as you say, your right hand doing one thing while your left foot's doing another, and all combinations of those in between. And singing while you're drumming, I am so far away from that. I can't even sing and play guitar, and that is the easiest thing of the whole lot. But anyway, by the way, I will say that as you get older, like myself, drumming is one of the very best things you can do to fight off age-related decline, both physically and mentally. It's a heck of a workout. And it's great fun. So there you go.
Yeah, I've seen Dave after playing a gig, and it's like he's just drenched in sweat. That is a great workout. Dr. Marianne Gary has been on here, and she has talked about memory. And one of the things you can do is find something that's difficult for you to do and master it. And that's one of the things that can help with age-related dementia onset. And or at least they've found correlations to that. They can't prove it's a causation yet. But one of the things she specifically described was learning to play the guitar. So I imagine the drums would be even harder. But let's turn into starting to talk about the tech here. Where did we start?
Okay, so we should probably start the story in the earlier 20th century. Probably the 1920s is a good place to go. And I'm going to start off focusing around the guitar because most of the evolution in music technology is guitar focused. So taking ourselves way back, of course, stringed instruments are nothing new. Stringed instruments have been around for hundreds, if not thousands of years. So the thing which today we call a guitar evolved from, mandolins and lutes and all those kind of things we had many, many centuries ago. And they all had one thing in common, which is you plucked a string and it created a sound. Now, the first challenge is how do you make that sound audible to an audience? And all of those traditional stringed instruments had the concept of using resonance for amplification. So they had hollow bodies, and so the sound of the plucked string would resonate and amplify and produce some kind of volume. And that served us very, very well for hundreds and hundreds of years. But when we got to, and I'd say probably the 1920s is when this became an issue. This was the era of jazz bands and swing bands and all of those kind of things. And all of a sudden, the poor guitarist is now competing with instruments like horn sections and drums, and he gets drowned out. So the challenge,
or
which
she.
then had, or she, indeed so. The challenge which had to be addressed was really one of volume. So amplification and things like microphones existed back in the 20s, but we had to find a way to apply those to the guitar in order to raise their volume to a level.
Did they start by just shoving a microphone in front of the guitar?
That was the initial approach, but you have to remember back in the 1920s, microphones were pretty damn big things. So you couldn't just shove it in a guitar.
Or in front of? I was thinking it's just in front of.
Put it in front of a guitar. The problem there is, though, guitarists, we tend to move around a lot. And as the guitar moves around and moves in and out away from the microphone, it can affect the volume you're getting. So you get inconsistent kind of volumes. So I think you know where I'm going next, which is that one of the first important factors in the evolution of music tech was the development of the magnetic pickup, which was a little device which sits underneath the strings on a guitar and converts the vibration of those strings into a signal which you can then amplify. And that's how you get volume out of guitar.
Is that like a voice coil actuator, essentially? Like a voice coil, like in a speaker?
Probably is, though. You probably know better than I do. I don't have your physics background, but yeah, it's a magnetic coil. Yes, indeed. Yes.
Okay, so it's got a coil of wire and a magnet. It's moving in and out, and that's creating an electrical signal from the sort of like a reverse speaker, if you will.
I guess so. Yes, that's true.
Okay,
yeah. I'd say,
and then turn that into an electrical
was already
signal.
A known quantity, so it's just feeding a signal into an amplification system, and then you could finally hear the guitarist.
Okay.
So this was back sort of late 20s, early 30s, and after that, the electric guitars as such started to evolve. One of the first things is that people realized, well, we don't need this hollow body anymore. So the purpose of the hollow body on a guitar, as I said, is resonance. It's a large echo chamber. But when you're getting the volume through the pickup, you no longer need the hollow body. And in fact, the hollow body just caused issues. It caused kind of feedback issues with the pickups. So we saw the development of what became termed solid body electric guitars. So now fast forward to the late 40s, early 50s, and this is when you have this explosion of solid body electric guitars and the creation of guitar brands, which you will still find today. So one thing I find fascinating is the three biggest selling electric guitars today here in the year 2025 are the Fender Telecaster, the Fender Stratocaster, and the Gibson Les Paul. Each of those three guitars was created in the early to mid 1950s and has barely changed in all that time.
Really?
There has been no evolution in the guitar itself.
Huh. But the technology that it uses, that it goes into, is where things have really changed?
Indeed. The evolution is really what happens after you pluck the string. The plucking of the string really hasn't changed in 60, 70 years plus. And there's not really much else you can do, right? You string 6 guitars on a guitar and you hit them with a pick. But it's what happens next is where life gets interesting.
Okay, so is that where we're going to go into changes in amplifiers?
Oh, no, this is where we get something even better than that, first of all. This is where when guitars became electric, people then started figuring out, well, now I can do stuff to manipulate the sound. And by the way, you have to remember that the evolution of the solid body guitars also kickstarted the thing which today we call rock music. So rock music as an art form didn't really exist before the electric guitar in the early 1950s. So along comes the Bill Haleys of this world and the Elvis Presleys of this world. And it's also all based around electric guitars. These weren't acoustic guitar people. They were using electric guitars. And the more forward thinking of these new rock stars figured out, okay, let's play around with the sound. And the first thing they figured out was typically something called overdrive. They figured out you're plugging your guitar into an amp. If you push the amp beyond the limits of its normal operating margin, the sound breaks up. And it breaks up in a really delightful way, a really distorted kind of gnarly way, which gives a kind of edge to your music. And so overdriven, distorted music was one of the first guitar effects in the late 50s, early 1960s. And that was just the start of things.
You know, coming from an ear that the brain that doesn't enjoy music, but an ear that prefers acoustic guitar, this description really resonates, if you could take that pun. So they're doing it on purpose. They're overdriving it on purpose because it makes a crazy sound. Yeah,
for sure. Yeah. And that really was the start of 60s rock and roll. But there were many other guitar effects which came on the back of that. So things like reverb, already kind of pretty commonly understood. Reverb is essentially emulating the sound of the venue you're playing. So, for example, you may want to recreate the sound of playing in a cathedral or playing in a small club or playing in a studio, those kind of things. You got effects coming around such as really crazy modulation effects like flanges and phasers and weird kind of space sci-fi kind of sounds coming out. Jimi Hendrix famously made use of the wah pedal, so an actual foot pedal which lets you kind of modulate the sound in tune as your foot moves to create crazy effects. And the 1960s was really the era of when guitar effects really came into the road. And what you started finding was that the big name guitarists of the 60s, and you think of the Hendrixes and the Claptons and the Jimmy Pages and the Pete Townsends, they all started creating their signature sounds. And their signature sounds was really based on a combination of a certain kind of guitar, a certain kind of amplifier, possibly a certain kind of speaker system, but certainly a certain combination of guitar effects. And these signature sounds are really quite well-kept secrets. They were closely guarded secrets. So you couldn't just walk out and say, I want to sound like Jimi Hendrix today. It's not that easy. We'll come on to how that is a lot easier here in the 21st century. But back then, this was the secret source of rock music.
Back when you were talking about the crazy sounds that they were just really fooling around with it, making wild and crazy sounds. I have an album. I only own 12 albums. One of them is called In Sounds from Way Out. And I've got to figure out a way to record a little clip of that for you, because I think you'll appreciate how ridiculous it is from back then.
Okay. So probably the next big evolution in amplification was the move from classic vacuum tubes to solid state amps. So the amps of the 1950s and 1960s were based on what we here in the UK call valves, what you in the US call tubes, those big glass monsters. And they make a very warm sound, but they have challenges in a music, particularly a touring environment. They're heavy. Tube amps are heavy. They're expensive, and they're very, very fragile. So if this was
before the invention of the transistor, right?
It is indeed. Yes. So given all these shortcomings of tube-based amps, throwing them in the back of a transit van to go to your next gig is just not a good idea.
Just shattered glass.
Wouldn't survive the journey. So guitar roadies would be packing replacement tubes in their bag for these eventualities. But as you say, the transistor came along, revolutionized all kinds of electronics. But just like many other forms of technology, guitar amps went solid state. They went transistor based, and resolved at a stroke all those issues of weight, of expense, and fragility. Now, it has to be said that...
Did they make any change to what you could do with it, or was it simply the portability and reliability of the equipment?
Not really. The changes come later on when everything goes digital. So save that thought for now.
Okay.
We'll get back to that. But it is important to say that tube amps have not completely gone out the window. You can go to your local guitar store now and still buy tube amps. So you may ask, well, why, given all the advantages of transistors? And really, it's probably the analogy would be the kind of people who buy vinyl records versus CDs. So the purist will say that tube amps still have a certain warmth and character about them, which even the best transistor amps have never really been able to fully replicate. I think most of us these days are solid state. We use transistor-based amps, but no, the purists may still prefer the old tube amps.
I am double checking Steve to see if he's making this up, and he is not. I just went to Guitar Center. You can buy a Fender Blues Junior lacquered tweed tube guitar combo amp for $800 today, and it looks like it's from the 1950s.
And that, by the way, I think that I'm going to guess that amp was introduced in the late 50s. It's a classic. As you'll see when we get onto the world of modeling amps, these days you can replicate an amp like that by way of a modern digital amp. But hold that thought again for now.
But how fun is that? I love that still exists.
Indeed. All right. In parallel with all these things changing the world of live music, there's also a revolution going on about the same time in the recording studio. So classic recording studios use tape. Okay, so you stick a microphone or you take a feed directly from your amp and you feed it onto tape. And you'd have things like 8-track studios, 16-track studios. These were the number of individual tracks you could lay down on a piece of tape. And by definition, it's limited. And tape-based recording has got many, many limitations. It's a very labor-intensive process. Editing is very tricky. You can't just go back and change small parts of things you may have recorded. You're limited in terms of the number of tracks. But roundabout, I'm going to guess the 80s saw the evolution and the introduction of the first DAW, the digital audio workstations. And now this is something you'll be familiar with, recording podcasts. Yep. So in the recording studio, it's a close sister to the kind of spoken word tools you would use, but a tool called Pro Tools emerged in the 1980s and pretty quickly became a de facto standard for this new style of digital recording. Non-destructive editing. It's very, very easy to just go back, make changes. Something called comping evolved. Comping is essentially picking the best bits of a recording session and editing it all together into a single final recorded version. You're unlimited on tracks because everything's digital. It's just hard drive space. You're no longer limited to 8 or 16 tracks. And you get a lot of editing tools. You can do things like pitch correction. So, for example, if your singer is just slightly off key, well, there are now tools to correct that. If your drummer is slightly off the beat, you can correct that. There's a wonderful technique called quantization, which will very nicely align everything the drummer does to the perfect beat. This just completely revolutionized the world of studio recording.
Many, many years ago, Shai Yamini, the performer, was on the show, and he talked about the tools that he uses in audio editing and that the things that he could do with this, with changing pitch and beat and all that. And he swears that if I make a recording of me singing, he could make it sound good. And I've never gotten the nerve up to send him a recording, but I still have that in the back of my head that someday I'm going to actually do that.
Yeah. Do it. And by the way, of course, the evolution after the studio-based tools like Pro Tools was into the laptop-based tools. So, I know that you have a slant towards the Mac user base. So people are probably familiar with GarageBand or GarageBand, as I'm sure you call it in America. This was, to use a rather pseudy term, the democratization of recording. So all of a sudden, you didn't need access to an expensive recording studio to go make a record. You can record it in your bedroom. And we'll get more into this later on because everything has changed. But DAWs have had a fundamental impact on the creation and the distribution. In fact,
so would you say that DAWs are what created the garage bands? So apps like GarageBand created garage bands?
Well, the original garage bands were, of course, bands from the 60s who literally threw stuff together in their parents' garage and started playing and recording there. So I think the term predated the Apple product, but anyway.
But I think it was probably a tip of the hat or an homage to that, right?
An homage, indeed. But this was really the tip of the iceberg of the analog to digital revolution. Because in addition to recording tools, amps went digital. And this is where things really do get exciting. So
let me stop you for a second there. So when we talk a lot about analog to digital, digital to analog, AD, DACs, digital audio converters, things like that. But I haven't had anybody on the show who would explain to everybody listening, what do you mean by analog versus digital? What does that really mean?
Okay, well,
please use physics. No.
Yeah. Now, come on, you remember I'm a computer science major, not a physics major, Alison.
Okay,
so give me a break here. But well, let me give you an example. So in the probably early 90s to mid 90s, the first digital amps started coming out. And these were amplifiers which we've said already, they've already gone this evolution of tubes to solid state. Now we start putting CPUs into amps. Now we start putting digital signal processors, DSPs, into amps. Now a DSP is an interesting technology. DSP takes an analog signal, such as you plucking a guitar string, converts it into digital, does some processing, plays around with it, manipulates it in some way, and then converts it back to analog, i.e. a sound, which can come out of a speaker.
So when it's digital, it's just bits.
It's bits. It's completely bits and bytes. Yes.
Not a continuous wave of something, but bits that it can manipulate.
And once it's in a digital form, you can do all kinds of stuff with it. And this is where the fun stuff I alluded to earlier really comes into its own. So I've got my guitar amp here. It's packed with computational audio and DSPs. Would it be nice if that amp could replicate that Fender Twin Reverb you just saw in Guitar Center, or any other? You pick your favorite Marshall amp, or you pick your favorite amp from ever. And at the flick of a switch, that amp can replicate the sound you get from a classic tube amp. This is the promise, and in fact, the reality that these modeling amps started delivering in the mid 1990s. And not just that, you can also add in effects. So all the effects I mentioned earlier, which previously the incarnation was a physical pedal you stomped on with your foot. Well, guess what? Now it's just a switch and a digital modeling amp. You probably have your iPhone app, and you can just create whatever selection of whatever amp you choose and whatever selection of effects you want to add before and after it. And there is your sound. And I mentioned earlier on about the secret sauce of these 60s and 70s rock musicians, the signature sound. Well, guess what? Now you can easily replicate those sounds with the touch of a button. And by the way, of course, like most areas, AI is invading this. I've got an app on my phone that goes to my amp. And if I say, hey, I want to sound like Jimi Hendrix on Hey Joe, bam, guess what? AI will pick up exactly the perfect combination of amp and effects pedals to give me that sound. And
wow.
Yep, indeed. This is a lot of fun.
So if it's on your phone, how is that ending up turning into sound coming out to my ear? There's a little gap between an iPhone app and that. Is it telling you dial this on your guitar and dial these buttons on in the interface to your amp?
The iPhone app is simply programming the amp. So there's a term which is the signal chain. The signal chain for a guitarist is the combination of devices that go between the guitar on one end and the speaker on the other. It's that combination of amplifiers and effects pedals. So when you get into the digital frame, you have a virtual signal chain. You can design this virtual signal chain on your iPhone, press a button, download it into your amp, which then triggers the DSPs appropriately, and magically out comes the sound you want.
So this is pretty crazy. Like, we went from acoustic guitars and then tube amps to this in 100 years. That's astonishing.
Indeed. And by the way, one of the other really fun aspects of this is I talked earlier about this, the democratization of music. Now that we can use these digital modeling amps to create these virtual signal chains and emulate the great guitarists of the past, this has also given rise to a community of tone sharing. So if you create a fantastic sound and you'd like to share it with others, well, guess what? You can pop it up into the cloud, into these sharing sites, and others can download your tones and benefit from your creativity and design work. So again,
a tone would be like what? What would a tone be?
A tone is this virtual signal chain, a combination of an amp and effects, and maybe possibly also a speaker stack to go with it. But the sound that comes out of a guitar is essentially a tone.
Oh, okay. The whole kit and caboodle here. This entire change to the analog signal to something completely different.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Now, in your little notes you gave me, you said you've got a little miscellaneous category here because we're caught up to the present so far.
Yeah. I've been conscious. I focused just on guitars today, which is an interesting. It's probably the most valuable angle to take. But of course, when things start going digital, then other instruments are affected as well. One of the first obvious ones is the whole world of synthesizers and sampling. So, for example, the earliest electronic keyboards appear in the late 60s, the 70s, things like the Modes and the ERPs. And all of a sudden, you get the emergence of electronic music in a whole different feel. No longer are you limited by the sound of conventional instruments. Sampling comes along, lets you essentially create mini recordings of anything from spoken word to sound effects, and you can pop them into your music, and all of a sudden you have the evolution of music forms like hip hop and others, which rely heavily on sampling. You get things like drum machines. So hey, I hate to say this as a drummer, but drummers are relatively easily replaced by technology. Essentially, all we do is sit there banging things, as I said, and creating a beat. And that's pretty easy to replicate with digital technology. So drum machines come around. So,
but they didn't get replaced when drum machines showed up, right?
I'm sorry, say again?
They didn't get drummers didn't get replaced when electronic drums came around. Their drummers are still there.
Not entirely, but in many forms of music, you won't find a lot of live drummers anymore. One of the other challenges of recording drums in particular is it's really expensive. So, for example, let's contrast recording drums in a studio with recording, say, a guitar or a keyboard. With a guitar, you run a cable or possibly a mic directly from the amp into your mixing desk. If you want to record drums, you are possibly rigging up as many as 12 to 15 microphones all around the drum kit to capture it authentically. And I'll give you an example, by the way.
Oh, I didn't think about that.
Yeah, so I'll give you an example. I have a drum teacher who's a real purist. He only has acoustic drums, the traditional drums you would have seen on stage. And he eschews all kinds of electronic technology. Now, I've got electronic drums, e-drums at home, which have a number of benefits, primarily for my neighbors, because they're essentially silent. I can bang away to my heart's content, listen to things through my headphone, and it sounds authentic. All my neighbors can hear is the softest patter of stick-on drum pad. But from a recording point of view, electronic drums have huge advantages. So I was chatting with my purist drum teacher the other day. He told me he uses 17 microphones to record himself when he's drumming. Well, guess what I do? I run a USB cable out the back.
I'm sorry. I thought you meant automatic replication of drums, not the ability to record an electronic drum. Sorry, I misunderstood what you meant.
I kind of veered from one to the other, but my point is that given that traditional drum kits are so problematic, it's just another reason why a lot of modern music creators will use a drum machine rather than.
But doesn't that feel completely different to be tapping on a little rubber mat than actually hitting a drum?
Yes, but you're getting to one of the themes I'm getting into later, which is that modern music is a little bit different. That's what
you don't even get a
like
workout,
days,
probably.
Allison.
You probably don't even get a workout, do you?
Probably not. You probably do not. No, indeed. By the way, just before we leave this, I just want to also just mention the effect of technology on vocals. So we talked already about auto-tune, pitch correction. Okay, so you have the out of key singer. You can just make tiny corrections and put him back into tune or her back into tune. But very quickly, pitch correction and auto-tune move from a technical tool to a creative tool. So I know you're not a music fan, but probably the landmark in this regard is a song which I'm sure many of your listeners will know, by Cher, a song called Believe in the late 90s, which really took auto-tune to a whole new level and unleashed the floodgates of auto-tune creativity and crazy, crazy vocal effects. So these days you can buy a $200 vocal processing unit, which sits between your microphone and the PA system. And you can do all kinds of crazy things with your vocals. You can add harmonies. You can double up vocals. You can do formant shifting. Now, formant shifting is essentially changing the tone of a vocal. So, for example, a simple example, you could make a male voice sound female or vice versa. All kinds of crazy things you can do with vocals as well. Technology gets everywhere.
I do know that song, by the way.
Oh, good. I do you a huge disservice. I apologize.
No, that's okay. It's a good assumption. I do remember somebody telling me the classic case of being able to auto-tune a voice was David Hasselhoff apparently cannot sing at all, and yet he's got an album where it sounds like he can. I want to say that was that might have been something that Shai told us about, but that was like the classic example of somebody who can't carry a tune.
Well, he's certainly a very popular recording star. For example, in Germany, I know he's very big, and I wouldn't be surprised if he's had some help from technology for sure. Indeed. But by the way, you know, I hate to break any of your recording secrets, Allison, but maybe you use vocal processing yourself. It's nothing to be ashamed of.
Yeah, a little bit, not too much, but yeah, definitely some a little bit of sweetening of the audio, as they say. So what about, you had a note about MIDI. Was there anything about that? I'm not even sure I understand what MIDI is. I know it's an app on my Mac.
MIDI is essentially a protocol which lets you program musical instruments in its very simplest form. It's code, it's computer code. A good example would be, let's say, for example, you create a melody on a MIDI-enabled keyboard. But you'd like to see what that sounds like played by an oboe. Well, MIDI can just convert that into an oboe or one of a million different orchestral sounds. That's just an example of MIDI in action. So MIDI is a technology which is big in the world of keyboards, drums as well to an extent. So, for example, I can record myself playing drums, output my recording via MIDI into my DAW, and then see what my electronic drum kit would sound on a classic 1960s drum kit, or maybe an electronic Roland drum kit or something like that. So it's another way of manipulating your sound using digital technology.
I can sure see how the purists have a problem with this, and yet you can't deny that this allows a lot of creativity that you couldn't have otherwise.
Indeed so, but this is a segue into, if I may, in the best Steve Jobs tradition, please allow me one more thing, Allison.
Okay.
May I make a bold statement?
Yes.
Okay. Modern music is rubbish. Now, I don't care to...
Hey, old man!
I don't kind of sound too much like my parents or too much like Grandpa Simpson shouting at clouds here. But music changed around the start of the 21st century for a few reasons, which I'll mention in a second. And to my mind, there hasn't been a heck of a lot of good music in the last 25 years. And I'll tell you why I think that is. I think there is some reason to believe this is true. there's a couple of reasons. Well, before I do, I actually want to quote a source and maybe refer your listeners to a very popular YouTuber called Rick Beato, Beato. Rick Beato is a musician and a music producer and a songwriter and a music journalist. He's got a fantastic YouTube channel, and this was a theme he took up just a couple of months ago, and I found it absolutely echoing all of my own thoughts. So I just want to share with you some of the things he said, which I'm completely in tune with. And that there's a couple of big reasons why modern music is rubbish. The first thing is it's too easy to make. So I talked earlier about the democratization of music recording via laptop-based DAWs versus the recording studio. That's great. Anybody can create a song. That's the good news. The bad news is anybody can create a song, and there's an awful lot of rubbish out there. And it's just way too easy. Around about the same time, the music companies stopped signing bands and focused more on solo artists because they were cheaper. The whole economics of the music business got turned upside down. All of it, why would you spend money signing an expensive rock band and all the expense that goes to recording them when you can find some talented guy sitting in his bedroom with GarageBand recording the next big hit? The economics just favor the solo artists these days. And bands, I'm afraid, have gone out of fashion.
I might be playing right into your hand here because you are calling out that it's more economical to have solo artists, but you've basically just dissed every Swiftie on the planet by saying that modern music is rubbish.
I will stand by that. But
Billie Eilish? I mean, come on.
They're talented artists, but they get a heck of a lot of help from technology. And by the way, I think you know exactly where this is going.
But does that make it rubbish? But does that make it rubbish just because they got a lot of help from technology?
To my mind, yes. It really does. It really does. We probably don't have enough time to explore why I feel Taylor Swift and Billie Eilish are bland in the extreme. I don't find them exciting at all. And by the way, they get an awful lot of help, those artists and others, from, and you guess where this is going, AI. AI songwriting tools are now very, very common. And yes, the Taylor Swifts and the Billie Eilishes of this world make extensive use of AI songwriting tools. Now,
so what?
Well,
that doesn't make the music rubbish.
Oh, no, that is a brave position to take, Alison. I have to.
No, I'm just challenging the supposition that because something was generated with AI, it is therefore rubbish. Because it's a solo artist, it's therefore rubbish. Because they had modern technology, it's therefore rubbish. Those that's not a direct line. There's not a logical line between those two. It might be rubbish, but drawing that direct correlation or causation, I don't know about that.
Well, okay, so you just pull the rug out beneath every music creator in the world then, because if they can be replaced by machine, what is the point of making your own music? But
I didn't say that. I didn't say they can be replaced by a machine. I mean, you could say the exact same. Everything you said could be radio recording people to podcasting, right? Because it's been democratized, and any joker in her bedroom, whatever, can create a podcast. So there's a lot to choose from, but there are still great podcasts. It doesn't mean that it's rubbish because I've got the technological tools to allow me to do this, and I'm not in a fancy recording studio. And it sounds like you're saying the same thing about music.
But you are coming up with the original content for your pods. Now, songwriting is different. So let's break this down to the basic musical theory. Music is 12 notes. Every song is only different from another song, with those 12 notes being arranged in a different fashion.
Except for Indian music.
Well, okay, I'm talking about Western music. Yes, there are different forms of world music. Yes, you are correct.
They have lots more notes.
We're in the world of Taylor Swift and Billie Eilish here. So we work in the world of 12 notes and chromatic scales. So this is a perfect topic for AI. So all the artists we talked about are making extensive use of AI. Now, right now, AI is not writing hit records exclusively, but all of these big songwriters will use AI tools. I think the term is ideation, So they'll create an AI-based song and they'll think, I like that chord progression over there. I'll use that. Or I liked that lyric over there. And they steal bits. So the top songwriting teams of today are AI assisted. They are hybrid AI human creations. Now, what's interesting is what happens when AI actually creates a hit record from scratch. Now we get into a legal minefield apart from anything else, because who gets paid?
But let's stay off of that. Stay off of that train, because that's a whole different topic. And I'm really going to challenge it here. What is to say that AI created song, if it's a hit record, is rubbish? That's all I'm getting to. Is you may find it offensive that it's not created by a human, but what makes it rubbish? Rubbish is in the eye of the beholder. Yeah, I think that you just like classic rock and that you don't like modern music. I don't think it has anything to do with how it's created.
Okay, well, let's take a step backwards and think about this. How do AI tools create music? Okay, so they have a large language model, right? Where has that large language model come from? It's been populated by decades of recorded music.
Not populated.
AI music is derived from decades of previously recorded music.
Correct. Trained on.
It's not original.
So no coding is original because we're all using GitHub Copilot to write our code.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, we can probably agree to disagree on that. But I just want to give you a statement, which I found very interesting. So I just want to read this paragraph to you. Creative AI tools can be seen as sophisticated plagiarism software, as they do not produce genuine original content, but rather emulate and modify existing works by artists subtly enough to circumvent copyright laws. You know what's interesting about that? That was written by ChatGPT.
Sure. I don't know. I'm thinking about the who was it that Ed Sheeran had somebody was saying that he stole their song because it sounded a lot like something they'd written. I believe artists have been stealing each other's ideas. Painters do this. Everybody is in a certain genre at the same time. Everybody paints like so-and-so at a certain era in time. Same thing happens with music.
Sure.
I think that's a natural progression, but I'm just going to keep contending that doesn't make what you hear rubbish. Because rubbish is in the ear of the beholder. People feel good listening to Taylor Swift, right?
By the way, Ed Sheeran was taken to court, and there's many other examples of that beforehand. But
yes, he won in that one.
The interesting thing is going to be copyright law has to evolve in this area, because as and when AI does from scratch create a billion-selling hit record, who makes the money? Is it the guy who created the song? Is it the company that created the AI tools? Or is it the music companies whose back catalogs were used to train the language models? It's a legal minefield.
I understand it's a legal minefield. I will never argue with you on that point. That is well beyond the scope of this. But I'm gonna throw one more way to argue with you about your saying this is rubbish. I'm going to pull back the curtain a little bit. When Steve and I were talking about having this conversation, he had already had this conversation with me, so I knew he was capable of reproducing it, but he wanted a good outline of what he was going to talk about. So what did he do? He went to ChatGPT and had to create an outline for him. And then he picked and chose what pieces of that he wanted to work with, exactly like you just said Taylor Swift or the other artists are doing with their music.
I'm a big fan of AI, just not for creating music. But by the way, just to finish on the theme of modern music is rubbish, I said there was two reasons. The first is it's too easy to make. The second is it's too easy to consume. So wind the decades back. I know when I was a teenager, I had my paper round. I would save my money up to buy that album I wanted, and I would go home and I'd stick it in my record player in my bedroom and listen to it over and over and over again. And I paid, I don't know, £5-6 an album. Now we're probably talking 3 times that. But of course, music consumption has completely evolved. We went from all the way back from vinyl to 8 tracks to cassette to CDs to digital downloads. And now, of course, we're in the world of streaming. and Spotify. And not only is it very easy to create music, it's very easy to get your music distributed. So I can sit in my bedroom with GarageBand and create my song, and I can upload it to Spotify. A heck of a lot of stuff gets uploaded to Spotify. There's not a lot of quality control on the stuff in Spotify these days. So music has essentially become valueless, and it's to my mind, it's hard to find the good stuff. For $10 a month, I think we've kind of lost a little bit of judgment, shall we say? It's a tricky area.
I can see what you're saying. It's just become diluted. Maybe is that the word you're looking for?
And I'll give you an example. By the way, last year, some friends of mine, they have a band. They wrote and recorded an entire album's worth of songs, 11 original songs, and they uploaded them all to Spotify and Apple Music. And just before Christmas, they had their 10,000th stream. And by the way, a stream in Spotify Apple Music term is when it's played for at least 30 seconds. So 10,000 people thought enough of their music to play it. Now, okay, that's not your Taylor Swift.
Or 10,000 plays. Might be 5,000 people twice.
It could possibly be that indeed. So, or any combination of the above. Now, that's not Taylor Swift. But I tell you, if I wrote something that 10,000 people listened to, I'd feel pretty happy about it. But do you know what their commission check, their royalty check was from Spotify for 10,000 plays? $40 between four of them.
Wow.
So the whole economics of music is upside down.
Well, I've heard that artists in general have always made more money touring than they make from their albums. That's always been true, right?
It's certainly true today. It may or may not have been true back in the heydays of the 60s, 70s, 80s, but it's certainly true today. The money's in tour and the merchandise. Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I want to buy a T-shirt for your band. That's what I want.
Well, we have a name, which you'll be pleased to know was created by AI, called the Titanium Saints.
The Titanium Saints.
Yeah.
I was hoping you were going to say mouse rat, but that's a whole other story. All right, Steve, I didn't ask you this ahead of time. Do you have any sort of social media presence where people could write to you and tell you that you're brilliant and that everything I said was all wet?
Not really. I guess I'm traditional, but you can always email me at steve@mallard.com, which is easy enough to remember.
All right. Well, I'm sure glad we reconnected, and I had a lot of fun doing this with you, Steve.
It was a blast. Thank you for inviting me, Allison.
Well, now I can say I actually did a chit-chat across the pond all about music. Bet you never saw that one coming. I had a blast talking to Steve. That was really fun. But that is going to wind us up for this week. Did you know you can email me at allison@podfeet.com anytime you like? If you have a question or suggestion, just send it on over. Remember, everything good starts with podfeet.com. You can follow me on Mastodon, podfeet.com/Mastodon. If you want to listen to the podcast on YouTube, you can go to podfeet.com/YouTube. If you want to join the conversation, you can join our Slack community at podfeet.com/Slack. You can talk to me and all of the other lovely No-Sella castaways there. You can support the show at podfeet.com/Patreon, like Zoe Brings Bacon did this week, or with a one-time donation at podfeet.com/donate. And there you can use Apple Pay or any credit card. Or you can use PayPal at podfeet.com/PayPal. And if you want to join in the fun of the live show, head on over to podfeet.com/live on Sunday nights at 5 p.m. Pacific time and join the friendly and enthusiastic No-Sella castaways. Thanks for listening and stay subscribed.